We're going to do a quick survey of the technology tools that we have found to be the most productive for supporting student writing, the ones that have had the biggest impact and the ones that students seem most willing and sometimes eager to adapt because of their power. So it's beyond the scope of this course to give you an in-depth tutorial about how to use each one of these tools, but this is more like a showcase of what we found to be particularly helpful in terms of technology. And we've already talked about the role that word processing plays. We don't even think of it as an assistive technology these days, but in fact, the ability to generate lots of text and then to cut and paste and revise with ease, to do spelling and grammar checks, and to share your documents with others for feedback, as well as the fact that you can't lose a paper because we assume that it's going to be stored in the cloud and perhaps on multiple devices, means it's much harder for the dog to eat your homework these days. You're going to have to come up with a better explanation if you don't have that paper to hand in at the right time. So, here's just a list of the favorite categories of tools. Certainly calendars and alarms, especially digital alarms for that point of performance planning that is so critical for students who struggle with executive function issues in writing. Audio recorders for capturing your ideas when you're on the move, when you're perhaps up and walking, maybe walking and talking with a peer or a tutor, riding in the car, getting good ideas. So audio recorders, which are probably built into the phone that you have in your pocket. Voice recognition has made a huge difference in the lives of many of my student writers. Visual organizers, like the one we see here, to help you generate and organize thoughts in a non-linguistic format. Text-to-speech for hearing what you've written and using it as a proofreading or revising tool, as well as for reading the text that you're probably going to be writing about. So what else? I'd be very interested in hearing from you all about the technology tools that support writing that you found most useful. And let's keep in mind that, very similar to the case in reading comprehension, the technology is a way to scaffold a known to be effective pedagogy. We always start with the student, their strengths and challenges, the particular kind of task they have to do, their preferences, their strategies, and the pedagogical approach, and then we look for tools that have features that support all of those, rather than starting with a tool and then saying, how am I going to use this? So as far as setting the time and place, just as we looked at for setting a time and place to read, setting a time and place to write, and especially a time and place that might put you in proximity with some help, like a writing center or a library, or knowing that you can check in by Skype with maybe a distance writing tutor. So there are, of course, many calendar tools, and Google Calendar is just one that I particularly like for all the features, including the fact that you can color code different kinds of tasks and that you can share it with other people and store it in the cloud. The point of performance tools we mentioned, having a phone or calendar that will send you a reminder at a predetermined time, like 15 minutes before you're supposed to begin a task, or to remind you to check in with a coach about beginning a task, I found very, very important. Similarly, setting specified times for you to work, and then times for you to take a break, and then time to resume work is also worked very well for many students. In terms of generating ideas, I have to say that voice recognition, a tool like Dragon or Siri or all the other built-in voice recognition tools that we now have as part of our many devices, has made the biggest impact. And if you were here trying to use Dragon in 1998, when it took hours of reading predetermined text that they sent you, reading it into the Dragon so that it would learn to recognize your particular voice and your intonation patterns, those days are mostly over. We're finding really good, up to 98% accurate recognition out of the box with a tool like Dragon or even Siri. It's quite astonishing, and it's a very powerful tool to generate ideas, especially for students who are way better at oral language than they are at printed language, and for students who like to be in motion when they're thinking their ideas for writing, so long as we keep in mind that what we're generating are first drafts, and maybe not even first drafts, certainly a shitty first draft. It may be just it may be a verbal dump that needs to be carefully combed through and annotated and marked up and reorganized, but it is a wonderful way of getting ideas that may be stuck in your head out on the page without the intermediary of either handwriting or keyboarding. Word prediction. I have never found many students who find this particularly useful. Perhaps it's because I'm working with older students, but the fact that word prediction is a very interfering kind of technology, that as you begin to type a word, it gives you a list of choices. I can imagine for really novice writers who have overwhelming difficulties with spelling even common words, this may be an effective tool. But for more experienced writers, it seems to interrupt the flow of ideas significantly, so that I'm not saying it should never be used, but I would introduce it with the idea that this may work for you if you have word retrieval issues or significant spelling issues, or if this type of kind of word by word support appeals to you. Another way to use a word prediction is actually to turn it on at the end of a sentence, not just word for word. And then the other tool for generating ideas are visual organizers, when we'll be looking at tools like Inspiration. Inspiration is probably the granddaddy of visual organizers. I still think it's the single best visual organizing tool. We used to have it on all our student computers and public computers, and then more recently we moved to Xmind, which I don't find as robust or as intuitive. And one thing that Inspiration, which was really developed with students, with the academic setting in mind, one of the superior features that Inspiration has is it comes preloaded with many, many templates that give you a format with prompts to scaffold them, questions and cues for how to fill in these templates for many different genres of writing in many different content areas. So here is a template for a compare contrast. It could be used in an English class, a history class, a science class, where you put the common characteristics in the middle and the distinctions or contrasting traits on the outlying areas. And remember, with Inspiration, it's very easy with one click of the outline button to convert this simultaneous presentation of visual information into a sequenced outline, and to drag and drop the items, the topics and subtopics, to elaborate on subtopics, to move into a Word document, so that you have a really seamless way of generating ideas, organizing ideas, and then finally drafting ideas without ever having to re-enter, recopy the text. So we guide students in the use of this. We give them guided practice, but the benefits of mind mapping, remember that when we work in visual and word formats, we're engaging many parts of the brain, and mind maps really mimic the way our brains organize information, which tends to be associative and nonlinear. And it's a wonderful kind of visual shortcut way to represent relationships without a lot of words to explain the relationships. And the built-in tools that support the writing process, I'll show you in a minute: the brainstorming tool, the organizing tool, the drafting tool. So here's what we talked about just a moment ago. When you create a visual pictorial representation of your ideas and how they relate to each other, just by clicking on the outlining button, you convert to an outline. It's very easy then to export both of these to a Word document and to elaborate on each point of your outline, as well as you can move things around easily, but to elaborate and finish your draft again without re-entering information. So this with the outlining version. If you prefer to start with an outline, you can also convert back to the diagram view. So sometimes when you students who are not very good at graphic design can generate ideas for a graphically organized piece of work in the outline form and then convert back. Inspiration has what they call the rapid fire tool. When you're brainstorming and you don't really have an idea of where you're going with your ideas, there's no need to kind of predetermine how the subtopics are going to be arrayed around the main idea. With the brainstorming tool, you start with this little cloud and you just say a word and you click and it automatically shoots in a random direction, shoots your ideas out, and then goes back to this initial one. And that it keeps this one selected so that your next idea will be shot off in a different direction, and then you can go back and reorganize. One of the great tools one of the great features about this is that if you have voice recognition, you can enter your brainstorming ideas verbally. You don't even have to keyboard. And here this shows an export in Word of, as I mentioned, the compare contrast. In this case, the student was comparing and contrasting two articles that they had read. So here's the visual that they exported. Here is the outline version of that. The student's task was to write a summary. So the student has the very good outline for this summary already established and can just elaborate and turn these ideas into complete sentences and maybe a little bit of polishing and reorganization. Some of the other kinds of templates that come with inspiration are, in social studies, comparing Britain and America, timelines, chronologies, autobiographical, writings about countries, writings about people. The templates are almost endless, and I think you would find them quite useful for almost any subject that you teach. In forms of tools for revising, certainly listening to what you've written is very powerful. Often when we set our eyes over a page, we miss errors because of our, gestalt, our brain's tendency to fill in what's not there or what we think we put down. So a lot of my students benefit tremendously from going back and listening to the computer read what they've written, as opposed to them reading, because the computer is saying what's actually on the page. And students often catch syntactical errors, especially things like missing words. And of course, you can access some of the built-in tools like synonyms, antonyms, the built-in thesaurus. And, these days that even Microsoft Word comes with a built-in text-to-speech tool. So there's kind of no excuse for not taking advantage of it. A very robust tablet-based tool, similar to Voice Dream Reader, is Voice Dream Writer, developed by the same developer, Winston Chen, and it can give you voice feedback as you type. It will speak the word. It can just speak the sentence. It gives you thumbnails of what you've written, which you can easily reorganize. It gives you word prediction and many other robust features. And I'd like to recommend two particular spelling grammar checkers that I find very designed for students who struggle with writing, dyslexic students in particular. They are fee-based, but they're extremely powerful and effective. They recognize words that many spell checking systems would not recognize, and they do things like correct for subject-verb agreement. Again, to keep up with the constantly evolving abundance of technology tools, I highly recommend the website techmatrix.org, where you can create a matrix by content area, grade level,